I thank you all for joining me today and thank our audience for joining in and listening into our conversation about regenerative futures, innovating sustainable living. With me today, I have Anya Freeman, Yasmin Mamouchier, Jennifer Koster, Max Studenikoff, Neil Collins, and myself, Christy Tagey. I'm your host. I'd like to briefly give a bio for each speaker so you know who we have here today. We'll start with Anya. Anya is the driving force behind Kind Designs, where she's on a mission to empower nature with cutting edge technology. A Ukrainian native who's called Israel, South Africa, and China home, Anya settled in Miami to attend law school, going on to serve in the U.S. Attorney's Office and clerk at the U.S. District Court before founding her own litigation practice. Frustrated by the lack of innovation solutions to Miami's rising sea level crisis, Anya assembled a multidisciplinary team to rethink traditional seawalls. The result? 3D printed living seawalls that function like coral reefs, sequestering CO2, nurturing biodiversity, and housing sensors that deliver real time water quality data. Since launching Kind Designs, she's transformed coastal infrastructure into a protective sensory organism that's improving water health in Miami and beyond. Next, Yasmin. Yasmin is an internationally acclaimed architect and interior designer renowned for pioneering sustainable and regenerative design. She blends human psychology, eco friendly materials, and advanced technology to craft spaces that foster well being and minimize environmental impact. A multiple award winner, including the Sirius Academy, European Design, and Innovation and Hospitality Awards, Yasmin serves as a sustainability ambassador for It Must Be Now and Leading Hoteliers, advising global brands on ESG driven design and mentors emerging talents as a visiting professor and Opal Awards juror. Jennifer is a serial entrepreneur, systems based thinker who is transforming the built environment through combining innovations in design, systems, and materials with AI and tech. As founder and CEO of Workwell Holdings, she leads a vertically integrated group of companies whose client facing activities and development projects are advancing circular construction, sustainable real estate, and next generation infrastructure. And as co founder of LiveWell, she's pioneering a wellness driven regenerative development model. Say that fast 3 times. With projects across the globe, Jennifer excels at translating visionary strategy into high performance outcomes by aligning multidisciplinary teams and de risking capital. Max is the founder of Climate Change Forum, also known as CC Forum, a global platform dedicated to tackling humanity's most urgent challenges, from climate change and renewable energy to waste management, healthcare, education, poverty, philanthropy, and social inclusion. A serial entrepreneur with more than 25 years of experience, he has launched and scaled multiple ventures across industries. Today, he leverages that track record as an investor, advisor, mentor, and keynote speaker, driving innovative partnerships and inspiring audiences worldwide to build sustainable, equitable solutions for our shared future. And Neil is founder of Latitude, pioneers in regenerative real estate, a partner at Hamlet Capital, and host of the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. Neil, you'll have to let me know later how I'm doing. He fuses development, restoration, and sustainability into every project. With a track record spanning community development, conservation, and climate adaptation policy across multiple continents, he brings deep international insight to the table. Coupled with hands on expertise in investment, sales, and operations across diverse asset classes, he offers a one of a kind perspective on building living legacies that deliver social, environmental, and financial value for generations to come. Friends, welcome and thank you for being here. I'd like to start out by asking the panel, And I love the roosters in the background. Uh, what are the factors driving this urgency right now for a sustainable mindset? Feel free to jump in. Anybody can take this question.
Well, I believe it's long overdue, really, if we are to. I'm probably speaking uh, in general terms here. If we are really keen to pass on the world as we know today to the future generations, it's just high time. It's more than overdue, really. What we're doing now, humanity should have been busy doing 50 years back, or actually prevent what's that I'm very far from being a doomsmonger. On the contrary, the mission of the event that I'm presiding is doing exactly the opposite, showcasing the groundbreaking solutions, investment-based solutions to the pressing issues we're all facing today. But what I'm just saying is that now or never, because nature doesn't need us. It will overcome anything really, but we do need nature, and we really we should really consolidate our efforts at all levels, private capital wise, political framework wise, mindset wise. If we are to really to bootstrap ourselves from the fine mess we're all in today, just as simple as that. So it's just now or never. That's my take on this.
Yasmin, what do you see as driving urgency?
Well, coming from architecture and design background, and considering that the construction industry is like a major part of the problems we have today with all the CO2 that's being produced, it's an urgency from my point of view from every aspect of profession that someone is coming by. For me, I'm representing obviously the construction and design industry, and I think that we have to on a voluntary basis before regulations are coming in to start rethinking how we design, how we build architecture and buildings. And this is what I see as my mission, to change the way we build by replacing harmful building materials through healthy ones. And there is a lot of options already today. So there's really no time to wait. And I have a feeling that the problem is everybody's waiting for some miraculous, whatever, solution, resolution. And I think it's about acting now and not wasting any time and trying to get influence beyond our own practice, and that's what I will do about my global talks and showing tangible projects like what you mentioned about Anya. The problems we have is partly it's the waste that we're producing with plastic waste, which is worse. It's going to be there for 1,000 years. So that's why we purposed it and worked in 3D printing, having exhibition at Design Miami, at Basel, and Biennale, where you can show to the world what we can do, and then at the same time show what can replace all the harmful materials and how we can save, this in the world. And I think it's like I said, we come a bit from different backgrounds, but everybody has the ability to show. And for me, it's not about talking. It's really about tangible projects. I want to see, what are you really doing in executing? And this is where we have to push more from talking to execution and implementation.
Anya, what do you see as sustainable in your work, in the work that you do? What kind of conversations are you having around sustainability in the work that you're doing?
Well, I agree with Yasmin. like you, also got very frustrated. People kind of standing on the soapbox, complaining about climate change, and writing endless book and endless articles. Especially in Miami, we see this like every month a new article about how terrible South
Right.
Florida is. We're all gonna be underwater by 2060. You have to be crazy to invest in real estate. And there was much less conversation actually around solutions. And so we are very singularly focused on one issue, which is rising sea levels and flooding, because Miami really is ground zero for this problem. We're the first city to really face it at scale. And everything we do will either be an example to other coastal cities around the world or a lesson. And so we were here to make sure that we are, in fact, an example by bringing climate technology to address flooding. So what we do is 3D print seawalls that are structurally identical to concrete seawall systems. So you're still protecting the coastal city from flooding, erosion, but we're also able to incorporate a biomimicry design, transforming an infrastructure product into something that now also functions like a reef. It dissipates waves, improves the quality of water dramatically, and yet there's no green premium. The living seawalls are actually cheaper than conventional toxic concrete walls. And I think that economics piece is really, really important for a solution to be scalable. And that has really been the key to our early adoption. We just got started 2 years ago, and we installed the first seawall within a few months of our existence and haven't stopped printing since. And that's because the economics make sense, and everything else is like a massive bonus as far as the environmental impact and the improvement of quality water for the whole community.
Jennifer, you're also in this construction space. What have you seen that's driving the urgency, the conversation around sustainability?
Well, I I shudder to actually say that I don't see enough urgency in this space. I think that we're too busy waiting for regulators to tell us what to do often. And if you look at the differences between the EU market and the US market, which is part of our existence is building a bridge between the Netherlands, but also the broader EU market and different innovations that are coming out here from a materials perspective, systems perspective, design perspective. Um, the regulatory environment here has been much more aggressive from a
And when you
sustainability.
say here, you are in the
Europe.
Netherlands. You're talking
Correct.
about Europe. Okay.
Yes. So it's been a lot more aggressive here. So there are things that are known around energy efficiency and design practices for 20, 30 years that are really just starting to hit the ground well in the US. And I think the part of the reason for that has been very convenient to wait for the legislation to turn around and drive this initiative forward. And the other thing is there is definitely a narrative, and Anya touched on this as well, that sustainable means more expensive. And so we have many conversations with clients about this, from single family homeowners all the way up to hospitals and data centers, where inevitably when it comes time to talk about the budget, all the sustainability things that you would want to see at the planning stage and concept stage are there. All of a sudden, when it gets to the budget stage, these things start to fall off the table. And we're trying to prove that that's actually not the case on a total level. And the other sort of short-sighted approach has been very much focused on the capital expenditure of your initial construction costs and ignoring the whole operating cost long tail part of that. So we are really aggressively trying to educate people about looking at both sides of that and really understanding what they're spending their money on and the real benefits of taking a more systems-based approach. So sort of unlike Anya, we're not focused on one area. We're really trying to take a look at a total project perspective and how do all these different components integrate together to deliver the highest performing project and the highest performing site. Because it's also not just about the building, it's about how do you really create a total program for a site that makes sense.
And one of the things I know you're doing is making sure that all the stakeholders understand each other, that they're talking about, because as you mentioned, when you and I talked one-on-one, was that sometimes one part of the development team of a project has their eyes focused on one thing, another on another thing, and then the client has this picture of how things are going to be, but it doesn't necessarily align with what the other people are thinking. There's like five brains working on, well, more than five, but five different perspectives maybe working on one project and not always aligned. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think it's just the nature of not just the construction industry, but many of our industries. They're very siloed, so people tend to stay in a particular lane. And I think Yasmin will agree with me that the next generation of buildings, you really have to be taking a step back and looking at how all of these things integrate together, because it's not just about architectural design, it's not just about FF&E or just about engineering. All of these things.
Wait, you said FF&E?
Yeah, sorry.
What does that mean?
So your interior work, your finishings, furnishing, and things like that.
Okay.
So So it's a total perspective and how all those things integrate together. And then at the same token, talking about stakeholders, it's sort of the same thing. You have to have this stakeholder approach that is really educating people along the way about the why this versus that, the benefits of this versus that, and trying to keep them engaged in the process, which um, happens on larger scale projects, really large scale projects, but it's still not really commonplace, I would say. There's still this very siloed approach to projects.
Neil, I know in the work that you do, you have similar experience. So I'd like you to weigh in on that siloed experience and how you bring people together, but also talk a little bit about what you're doing and um, how some regulations or policies are impacting the work that you're trying to do.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Christy, and I do want to get into that, just touch on what's creating that urgency, because we're all really familiar with the poly crisis that's going on, and we've got some really big systems thinkers on the panel this morning. For me, I've got skin in the game, and his name is Lucas, and he's 8 years old. So that's really where I'm coming from in our work, which is in the built environment, as it touches so many different intersections of what it means to be alive in today's society, because we deal with housing, we deal with economy and livelihood, and finance and capital. Uh, and so what we're doing is we're going out and actually targeting parcels that are under development threat, from suburban sprawl, preserving the farm, converting it to regenerative agriculture, and clustering meaningful and sustainable community within that. There is a lot of regulation that goes on there. And the best practices that we've learned over the past 15 years is to actually work with the community and work with our stakeholders and actually be able to weave together. There is a ton of policy work that goes into it. Of right now, what everybody is struggling with is we've had a very linear and efficient system that's had trillions of dollars worth of investment flowing through it for a very long time, and we're trying to figure out where those cracks are and how we can overcome them. A lot of times I've got to go out and get entitlements. I've got to actually take a piece of parcel and work with the local municipality to say, this is what we envision for this. And if I do that from a siloed perspective, especially as an out of town developer, then I'm going to get a lot of questions. But if we can come together and say, look, we've actually taken our time and done our due diligence and worked with community stakeholders, from universities to affordable housing groups to really respected nonprofits in the area, then we can actually create a vision and a plan that is hopefully has a chance to make it through city councils and municipal leaders there, and and still finding, like, we're the things that aren't so sexy around civil engineering and the like. Those are the biggest areas, but the biggest hurdles that we face.
For example,
For example, we have invested a ton of money into removing water from our sites as fast as possible, and we want to get it out, and we want to deliver it somewhere that's out of sight and out of mind. And we really have no idea, as just someone that lives in a home, where this goes. We have no idea how much energy that it takes. We have no idea the downstream impacts that it's taking. Like, I live on the west coast of the United States. Just stormwater alone, if we were able to capture that, actually keep it on the land, we would have salmon flowing within our rivers. But instead, what we're doing is we're flushing potable water. We're putting a ton of chemicals into places. We're thinking through what should be a very kind of circular system, creating a linear path for it, and we're paying those consequences. And unfortunately, our accounting cycle is not really looking at the externalities that's getting created there. We're just looking to return on uh, our financial investment, rather than really trying to optimize everything that we're looking for whenever we're putting together a project.
I've heard and seen several of you talk about circular economies. Can you explain, so anybody, explain, what do you mean when you talk about circular economies or circular projects?
Do you want me to take that? I can take that.
Please. Yep.
Um, so on our side of things, the circular economy is many things. From a construction perspective, it's trying to take a material that's been used in one function and trying to either re-engage that in a similar function or find a way to break those materials down and use them in another function. I'll give you an example. There's the Netherlands and France, at least to my knowledge, and I'm happy to be corrected, are probably the leaders in this area, and have really been innovative. I think the Netherlands, partly just because there's not a resource-rich country in terms of construction materials, so they've been very innovative and creative on how they reuse things. And there are projects here that you'll have a full building that's coming down, and they will do a materials catalog of what's in that building. And of course, most buildings are largely concrete and steel here, and some wood, but it's not the primary. And they'll do a breakdown of what's in the building and factor that into the design of the new structure and figure out how they can actually take those materials and repurpose and reuse them. So the whole concept being reusing what we have and not pulling out new materials from another location. It's certainly not a perfect system. I haven't seen a project get 100% circularity, but there's certainly two cases that I know of, one in the Netherlands that's 87% and one in France that was 95%. So that idea of reusing what we have, and it's actually kind of what Neil was touching on with water as well. I mean, it's insane to me, especially having been a Californian and seen what's happened in January with the fires, that we are not storing our water on site and creating more circular water systems. And that is a regulatory challenge, and it's one that we're now found ourselves in the middle of trying to resolve. But yeah, so I'll let someone else answer.
Well, I think it's like, material circularity means like recycled, renewable, or biodegradable materials. And we've been living and produce, make, and dispose it. And that's really the change of mind that we have to think. It's not this mentality, it doesn't matter what happens with it, we just get rid of it. We have to really think about the life cycle. That's what is meant with circularity and life cycle thinking. And that's why these biodegradable materials that we have been discovering and using, like mycelium or hempcrete, are solutions, as alternatives against, for example, concrete, which is extremely harmful, for the environment. And it's also harmful for human beings. That's another fact. It's not, talked about. I mean, we're talking a lot about, maybe we talk about it later, about toxins in most of the materials that we are surrounded by because of all these chemicals, formaldehyde and all this, which are cancer agents. So there's, it's not just about the environment, it's about human beings. We're part of nature. And I think and then there's another big subject called embodied carbon. It's meanings when you get something ordered, how far does it come from? The transportation from one place. You don't want to have something very far away. And to be honest, I still see it in hospitality that sometimes it used to be, very trendy to get the interior design of a hotel, the production done in China, shipped over because it was cheap, and nobody cared about the circularity. And that's exactly what you shouldn't do. You look about local materials, the closer it is, and then you have to have a concept. And this will change with digital passports, which are coming. Unfortunately, because of the Trump administration, which has kind of made everything going backward and stopped, this is being delayed. But nevertheless, it will come. It will come. And I think it's always good to be thinking about it, working about it, and implementing it now before it is just regulated, because it will change the paradigm for our existence.
I
jump
want
in
to.
too,
Oh,
Christine.
go ahead, Neil. Yeah,
Because
please.
I think we can talk about circular materials and circular design, but it also really translates down into circular economy, and really seeing how much resilience does a community have, and you can actually trace the amount of dollars, like how many touch points does a dollar, whenever a consumer spends it on something, how long does that stay in a community? And the more times that money can circulate within a local community, the more resilient it's going to be. But we've designed our economy in a lot of ways to extract that dollar as fast as possible. And so circularity, it can really be applied in a lot of different areas.
I want to go back to something several of you have touched on, and it's the material that we use. Anya, I'm sorry, Yasmin, I think you were the first one who explained to me how dangerous concrete is, that it constantly gives off CO2. Anya, I know that's something that you have worked on with your living seawalls. Can you tell me a little bit about the materials that you use? What makes up that living seawall? Because I look at it, I know it's 3D printed, but it looks like concrete. What is it, and where does it come from?
Sure. So we have to meet building codes. That's kind of like level one. You have to at least meet building code. And for most seawalls, the requirement is 5,000 psi concrete. So with or without us, these concrete seawalls are going in. But what we have been able to do is really innovate that mix. So the main component that we've been able to remove from the mix is Portland cement. Portland cement causes a lot of the toxicity. It leaches chemicals into the water after a seawall is installed. Without Portland cement, there's less chloride, there's less metal, and therefore less leaching. And the second improvement in the mix is that it's actually mixed at a 30% lower temperature. Therefore, the carbon footprint is also reduced. So,
Wait, let me interrupt for just a minute to clarify. You said there's a reduction in temperature. Is that a reduction in temperature of the seawall? And if so, does that impact the temperature of the water?
no,
No.
I just mean
Okay.
the production process when the concrete
Okay.
mix is made. One
Okay.
of the problems is it's made at extremely high heat. So, our mix specifically, it made at 30% lower temperature.
That's
Yeah.
significant.
So, we are still working with the parameters of the building code, which is obviously somewhat limiting. We have to meet the strength requirements, we have to withstand hurricane conditions, but we are able to keep pushing the limit on what that mix is made up of. But the primary impact of the seawalls is not the material. We don't have a carbon sink material, unfortunately. The primary impact is that we're able to attract all the sea life. So we're transforming an infrastructure product into a marine habitat. And as sea life attaches, they're actually depositing their skeletons and their shells into the wall. And then those shells are sequestering carbon from the environment. So it's not the material itself, it's what's attaching to the wall after installation.
And while you do seawalls, correct me if I'm wrong, but I recently saw something about a project that you've done in New York.
Yes, it's similar. We are working with the Billion Oyster Project. They're the largest deployer of oyster reefs. So we co-designed a brand new reef specifically for oysters. Oysters are very important. One oyster filters 50 gallons of water in a day.
How many gallons?
50 gallons, just one little
50.
oyster.
One little oyster.
It's amazing. Like our first seawall we ever installed, it was the world's first 3D printed seawall, was a year ago. It's only 100 linear feet. It's a small residential project. And today there's over 1,000 oysters on there. So that one little seawall is filtering 50,000 gallons of water in a day. So oysters are amazing. It's like one of the top priorities is like how do you create surfaces and designs that will attract oysters. So that's something we worked on with the Billion Oyster Project in New York. This was artificial reef units, but we're also incorporating those design elements into the vertical seawalls as well.
So is that, okay, this is a basic question, but does that mean cleaner water because of living seawalls?
Yes, of course. That's the fundamental reason we're 3D printing living seawalls with a biomimicry design.
So it's strength to protect against coastal flooding, against the erosion, all of that stuff, but it's also contributing to the cleanliness of the water. And then I know that your seawalls can also collect data. Is that correct?
Yeah, we incorporated some sensors, but we weren't very happy with the sensors. It was promised it was very low maintenance, but it's like crazy. You have to like actually go to the physical wall, attach your computer to it to extract the data. So we are now doing some R&D with some new sensor partners so that we can just drop the sensors into the wall as we're printing, use 5G to get the data live 24/7,
Wow.
which is much more useful information than going to these sites and getting the information physically.
So I'm just a regular old person living my life and talking to you guys who are incredible leaders globally. Why is this conversation important, and what can I do? I didn't start some big huge company. I don't have living seawalls. I don't have construction companies or development or investors, big investors. Um, what can I do? What should I be doing? What should I be asking when development is happening in my area, when I'm considering building something new? And this question is open to everyone. Financing, what can I ask and do as a typical everyday person that wants to make a difference around sustainability?
Well, I think it's it's important to have, as a developer, you have to do some research. You can't just do it the way it's been done. I mean, one of the things that maybe will be a small solution. We are, as you know, Christy, we are working on creating a global online marketplace for sustainable materials, because my team and I have gathered over 400 sustainable materials that that clean the air, absorb CO2. I mean, just what like Anya was saying, there's another company in America who is actually growing algae in big open tanks using sunlight. They're using sunlight, water, and CO2 that's trapped. And this can completely replace the Portland cement, which is the harmful one. So there are like amazing solutions. It's not visible. That's why I like marketplaces, because they're accessible to the world, and to have it all in one place where developers and contractors can find their resources, and then using AI agents that are going to even make it easier for you to see what's like close to where you are, where the project is. So we need to have it on a bigger scale. I mean, that's one of the things, it's of the companies who want to launch. It's kind of like a start. It's going to be like a startup. But in order to make it, to solve the problem, at least in some ways, to make it more accessible, to make it more known, because at the moment it's very hard to find solutions. And you as a layperson, I mean, it is difficult. And even, as smaller developers, it's also a time problem. And so I think with AI, with the rapid development of AI and AI agents, it's an enormous opportunity to have something that's going to solve the problem exactly that you talked about. How do you get access? How do you even find out about it? And then, see real life examples.
Neil?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
No, I was just going to add on real quick, educate yourself and educate those around you. And I think that's something, and my daughter, like many girls her age, is obsessed with this Chinese site, Shein. And so I've been trying to educate her about why that's not a good thing, and why it's actually better for us to spend more money on one thing that's made locally and has is 100% cotton or 100% whatever good materials than these things. So I think kids are one thing, because of course they don't want to listen to any of us anyways, but educating and learn, like I am, like Yasmin, really looking in the market and trying to understand like what's out there, what are the next innovations, where is this all going? Anya, we have to connect after this call, but just what are the possibilities, and how can we think differently? And then I spend so much time educating contractors and designers on what's available, because they just don't know. Everyone is so used to doing what they've always done.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting these, what you're doing with your podcast is fantastic, because you're trying to get the word out there and trying to create connections with people so there's awareness. And that's super important.
Thank you. Neil?
Yeah, I took it more in terms of like, if you're just a normal person going about your life with your question, and I think that's amazing, because that's where so many of us are, and I really don't think that it's a proposition where we have to sacrifice, right? We really, our job is to build community and to get involved and be curious. I think a lot of it comes around cultivating mindfulness and realizing that our job is, we can go out and create beauty and participate in democracy and vote with our dollars and use our voices. And I love what Jennifer was saying about education and teaching our kids more ecological thinking. So that's how I think that we show up in mass with billions of people across the globe to actually make a meaningful contribution here.
I had conversations with each of you at different times. And I remember asking, I don't remember if it was you, Yasmin, or our conversation, Jennifer. I was having some work done on my house, and I really would like to have that done sustainably. But my local contractors wouldn't know about mycelium, which I learned from Yasmin, or some of the other alternatives, or if they know about it, I shouldn't say they don't know about it, how to source it. So Yasmin, I know you're working on a solution to be able to help people source it, but I have a question around um, the transport of that. Is there a challenge transporting those new materials to where they need to be? Does that sort of offset the good carbon footprint, the reduced carbon footprint that you have by using those materials when you transport them in?
Well, first of all, what we developed is to have really a global source. We have global sources of materials. So the idea is that you go always to the closer, the closest geographic location you have. If you look at reality today, how everything is built around the world, it's shocking from how many different countries, the most far away, things are assembled. I mean, I think there's so little transparency about it. It's really shocking to me. And I think that's why I'm telling you, you have to see, it's definitely sometimes better to, I mean, it's a complicated question because there are some materials who are really harmful, and concrete, just for everybody to know, has more CO2 than all air travel, all the travel in the world together. I mean, you just have to imagine that.
Wow.
It's just one material damaging more than all the travel in the world. And you can Google this. So,
and Yasmin, sorry to interrupt, but I think one of the things that you taught me that I want to bring up is it's not just one time that concrete is an issue. It gives off CO2.
well, not CO2, but it has harmful. It has harmful. But when it gets hot, for example, if you in Switzerland, they have a lot of concrete houses. Then there's a fume that's coming out, which is very bad, and that's why children today have allergies. And so it's this invisible, it's these invisible harmful agents that are acting. The CO2 is more like, like Anja was saying, in the production of concrete, you have to have it on a certain heat, and it's always combined with Portland cement. That's why if you can replace Portland cement, you're already solving the problem with the CO2, which is done by one American company called Prometheus, who has a patent now, and it's a huge innovation, which was which is being licensed, I think, as we talk about it now. But in general, I think you have to, if you have local wood, and I would have reclaimed wood from Holland, I would still prefer to have the local wood if it's closer by. But you have, first of all, to get transparency where materials are coming from, where everything is coming from. Because we live in a global world, it's not just about materials, everything, from the food, from machinery, from products. Sometimes it's assembled, we know like what's all done. The iPhone is done in China. There's still the problem of the economics. And this is what, we kind of were touching before, that obviously as long as there's always something much cheaper somewhere, nobody really cares about the environment, unfortunately. And just to give you the example of mycelium is something that can grow. Hempcrete is something that can grow. You can literally, have it done next to your home. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it can be done in different countries. You don't have to take it. So those are the most interesting material, and those are materials that can replace concrete. So you have to, there's a bandwidth of differences. And I think it's about these big, materials, which is concrete, is like should not be really produced because it's one of the worst materials in the world. And there are solutions, and they can be done locally. And it's not about having to import it from very far away. But first of all, there has to be transparency to understand and how you can support more local companies that are also producing something. The problem is that a lot of these innovators, because when we did our research, we have from very small to medium to big companies. And the small ones are really hard to find because, you know, in a digital world where there's the first pages are always paid by big companies when you Google, do research. Now it's a bit easier through AI. You know, if you go on Chat GPT or Perplexity, you will get faster to results. But that's the problem. So it is about spreading the word, doing podcasts like this, talking about this, teaching about it. You know, starting with education from children. I think schools have the, you know, should educate. It should be a subject, sustainability. You know, from really early age on.
Right.
And so it's a manifold problem that has to have many solutions to be solved.
And Max, I see you were thinking about something. Let's see if your mic is working. We can't hear you.
I hear you.
David, are you able to help us with Max's mic?
No, we don't hear you, Max.
Okay. Darn, because Max, I wanted to ask you about, maybe you can sign out and sign back in, because I wanted to ask you about investors and if we're seeing a push there. Neil, I wanted to ask you about that a little bit while we wait for Max to, yeah, it's not coming back in yet, Max. No. No. Can you sign out and sign back in? That might be the magic. And in the meantime, Neil, I want to ask you, are you seeing a push? Oh, there we all are again. Are you seeing a push from investors, from tenants to include more sustainable practices and materials?
Uh, investors and tenants are very different groups, so it's hard to lump them in. On the consumer residential side, I think there is a growing percentage of people that are really interested in actually finding community and living in healthy habitats. On the investment side, I think it's really fractured right now. You know, ESG is coming under a lot of scrutiny. The big thing that I'd say is, like, we have a lot of money in institutional capital that are pure fiduciaries. So what that means is these are pension funds where you have fund managers that are investing on behalf of other people, and they are just singularly focused on, we need to provide the highest ROI that we possibly can. So there is no other mandates. You're not looking at where impact can come from. So if we're missing that piece, then and we're not thinking about the externalities, then they're going to the public markets. And as much as we want systemic change there, I'm not seeing it that much. I think within the impact investment realm, you know, everybody's still trying to figure out, like, am I comfortable calling myself
Yeah.
impact investment? Does that actually mean concessionary returns, so below market rate returns? Do people actually want that in their investment portfolios? I love the people within that space. It's particularly the impact investors that are showing up, and they're realizing, like, the world that we get is the world that we invest in. Those are the people that I want as my LPs within our fund. But I also am trying to figure out, how do we bring in the big dollars? Like, our projects are not cheap by any stretch. So we do need to make the tent bigger. I wish that there was more opportunities and pathways for that institutional capital. But basically, you know, because I work with real assets and real estate, you know, the way that we value this is, we're not valuing nature, right? Like, the way that we value nature is to extinguish our development rights. The conventional industry really looks at this from, what's the highest and best use that we can do with this parcel, and from a very kind of narrow economic lens, which is, we can build upon it, or we can do something that may be a little more extractive. So I think from the capital side, we don't have a lot of financial instruments that says we want to preserve this nature. And you know, as for tenants and the residential side of things, we'll see. You know, I don't think people know that there's a lot of options out there right now. So
That
that's
seems
what
to
I
be a
understand.
familiar refrain from everybody, is that there's not a great understanding of the options available. Max, I want to turn it over to you to see if your mic's working, because
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
And yes.
Yes. Oh my God. I've been hearing it all the way
Welcome,
through.
welcome back, Max.
Dying
It's
to
okay.
put in my
But
2 pennies
I'd
worth.
like,
I just wanted
let's see
to,
if we can,
if I may
please.
kindly be allowed. Sorry, just whilst Yasmin was speaking, I was just wanted to corroborate what she was saying. See, the thing is that we pontificate until we're blue in the face as to when the policymakers are going to work out the right political frameworks to regulate, the quality of material, the provenance. Yes, we can use blockchain and AI to trace the sourcing. Yes, we can make sure it's the materials are produced and supplied by the local suppliers rather than fetched from elsewhere in the globe. But at the end of the day, one very simple maxim: it is the market that will determine, ultimately define, what particular materials will replace the current big polluters, which is concrete accounts for a whopping between 10 to 12% for CO2 emissions, as we all know. Look what happened to the renewable energies. No one was investing in them 10 years ago. Yeah, that was a good try, good kickstart, right? But why? Because it was not economically viable. The moment the cost of production and launching these renewable lines, including solar and wind and now hydrogen, became economically viable, everyone is jumping on the bandwagon because the cost of producing solar energy, wind energy, is now just has fallen down considerably. The same thing, I hope, later is going to happen with the construction materials. Yes, we all need the frameworks. Yes, we all need these newfangled devices, including AI and blockchain and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's the economic sustainability in the very first place that will be the defining factor. And that probably foreruns one of your questions, Christy, with regards to investors, because that's what I'm seeing at our investors forums on a daily basis. Is that making sense to you?
It is, and I did want to ask you what frameworks or metrics matter the most when you allocate capital. What
Well, you see,
or to add on to that, what instruments have you found that drive real change? So I'm talking about carbon credits, green bonds, sustainability bonds.
a bit of everything and none of these.
That's not helpful,
Right.
Max.
I will expand what I mean, right?
Please.
When it comes to any sort of metrics, I mean, obviously, people think in terms of ESG or SDG scores as the panacea. It's not a panacea. It's akin to one ticking a box. I would have thought that the overriding criterion, or criteria in plural, for any responsible company, be it small or big, doesn't matter really, is not so much complying with the ESG scores, which really just defines more.
Let me interrupt for just a second to ask, for people who don't know what ESG means, that's environmental, social, and governance, correct?
Well, it's the talk of the town. There's nothing is more widespread than ESG or SDG regulations. Even people just remotely who haven't heard about the UN, perhaps they know SDG or ESG goals, right? That's the talk of the town. It's a kind of a bible of any modern thinking company, strategically and tactically. And they have what is known as ESG scores. That's a kind of a metrics. I just don't want to go into the details really, but I'm trying to convey one very simple message. No matter what the metrics are, in this case, SDG or ESG scores or something different, And this could be a lot of tools like green bonds and carbon credits, which, by the way, is very, as you know, controversial, because we were hosting a presidential style debate at CT4 in Paris last year. Not a friendly discussion like we're having today, but across the bar, standing, and it ran along the lines of carbon credits, a viable solution or an indulgence to pollute. And you should have seen what was happening. It almost came to fist fighting,
Wow.
not only on stage, but in the audience, because it's such a polarizing subject, really. So when you say carbon credits, I mean, you have to take that with a pinch of salt. I personally
Sure,
believe it's
sure.
a good interim solution. It's a provisional sort of way of going about things, but I don't think it's something which humanity should orient itself at in the long term. But that just sorry, I've digressed from the
No, I appreciate that.
topic. The simple message I'm trying to convey, no matter what the metrics are, whether it's SDGs, scores, or whatever, all of these tools, the one overriding criterion for economies, large and small, should be the responsibility in the long term. So it's not so much complying with some sort of regulation in this case, regulations in this case, SDG, whatever, just to tick off the box, but really prioritizing the impact over the short-term profit. Just as simple as that, if that makes sense to you. So it's not
sounds
confined to any
simple.
particular A, B, C, D, but it's just the larger strategic picture of what the camper is looking at.
But if I
Thank you.
can add
Please.
to it, I also think that there is lower operating cost, and the energy saving of cooling and healing naturally is quite high, and this is not common knowledge. Unfortunately, again, it's like there's some kind of missing the educational part, because we have materials and we have done we have got data to back what we are talking about, how some materials can reduce your energy cost by 50%. So there is a definite proof, and actually the asset value increase for green buildings is much higher than traditional. And I was just in Berlin, we just had the Super Return Conference. I don't know if you know it. It's the biggest private equity for institutional investors. I'm sure, Max, you know. And there was a lot of talks about that institutional investors are very interested into better ESG built buildings. They're looking at green buildings, and they see it as the future investment, that it's the big ones are really starting to understand it. I mean, we had a lot of conversations around that subject, and it gave us some hope that there is an understanding. It's not about being more expensive, but the value of your property will increase, and operational costs will go down, beside the fact that a lot of consumers and users are in demand. I mean, in luxury already since quite a long time, but even in the mid-market, it's coming down now. There is more awareness, and if you have properties that, no matter what, not just in hospitality, in all kinds of office space, you're having an advantage to a conventional building. So that's one. I mean, there's a lot of negative things, but I think we have to see are definitely some shift happening.
I know we are coming to the top of the hour, and I want to ask one question of everybody. Just in this conversation, I think it's safe to say sustainability is complicated. However, there seems to be, maybe now more than ever, an increased opportunity for innovation. So if you had to give advice, and I have enjoyed every conversation that I've had with you guys, because if you guys, to the audience, if you haven't heard these people individually, you should check out the podcast with them individually. Neil's yours is coming, and Max will have to do one together. But this panel has done incredible things in moving the needle. And Anya, I loved our conversation where I said, you were a lawyer. How did you know how to build living seawalls? And you shared it was out of your frustration that you made this happen. So you weren't an expert in 3D printing or seawalls or in marine life. You definitely had an interest. So from each one of you, if someone is listening that has an interest in sustainability, in innovating, in starting something, what is one thing that you would, or a couple things that you would say to them to encourage them? Max, let's start with you. Oh, Max is oh no, there
Well,
you
I'll
are.
probably share my view from the my forum's perspective, which is kind of an umbrella, really. That makes me seem like a jack of all trades and master of none in some way, because what we're doing, we're getting together under one roof, the investors, each laser focused on a particular domain or a variety of those, and we can kind of act as a platform where things are happening. Well, if there is one thing that I would point out is that we've reached a point when it is not so much through the political frameworks of any kinds, or through policy making, or through politicking, as I say, that things can budge off the ground, but through absolutely long overdue, resolute investment and mobilizing of private capital into groundbreaking solutions. And we're very, very fortunate because over the last 8 years, since the first CT Forum was held in London in 2018, we've succeeded in forging these two rather important networks. On the one hand, we have the investors community represented by family offices, general partners, limited partners, funds of funds, VCs, angels on the one hand, but probably more importantly, we're being knocked on our doors by a whole variety, a whole huge range of projects at various stages of their development, from pre-seed to NASDAQ or LSE listed. And that's exactly what means the difference. And it's through connecting, as I keep saying, the most discerning, the savviest of the investors to the most revolutionary, the groundbreaking projects that we can bootstrap us from the really fine mess we're in today. It's through investing in technology. It's through mobilizing private capital. It's now or never. If not us, then who?
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, can I echo that?
Please. Yes.
I think it's not answering your question exactly, but I have to agree with Max. I mean, you know, I've been on this path for many years, and the mobilization of capital has been, and I think probably Neil will agree on this as well, it's been the single hardest thing to get the types of projects that we're doing off the ground. And there's a number of reasons for that, and it goes back to this siloed thinking. If you don't tick the box for the investor group, you just don't fit. And with us, because we're crossing over so many different sectors and the impacts that we have are across so many different sectors, we don't fit any box. So kind of strangely enough, through some major projects that we're now engaged with around rebuilding in Los Angeles, we've really, and also the, how do I word this? The lack of certainty around federal funding for the disaster recovery situation. There's been a massive mobilization of private capital, and we've sort of been caught up in that swing of things because they're looking for solutions. And now you see these P4 partnerships happening. So there are public commitments that may not be capital, but they're tax incentives or other incentives. Public, private, and philanthropic partnerships, which are, I think, what's going to really change the game. It's certainly been eye-opening for me just in the last few months to see the amount of private capital mobilizing when it hits your backyard, that you start to think, okay, we need to really think about this differently. And in the past, in a place like LA, you wouldn't have private money going into infrastructure planning and solutions, for example. And because of the current situation, so there's always a silver lining somewhere. Because of the current situation.
On that note,
yeah.
On that note, I mean, we're feeling this being rubbed off the forum as well, because in many ways we're seen as a kind of safe haven for a number of investors, including those from the USA. We'll be hosting our 12th global edition, for those of you who might not be familiar with that, in Zurich, Switzerland, which is the home of many headquarters of many corporations and banks and institutions and family offices, in late September this year. And we'll be doing the pre-event on the 10th of July. It's a one-day event, and by the way, you're more than welcome to join us. It's complimentary, the 10th of July. But what I've been seeing is that there is a huge proportion of US-based investors and projects who are looking at ways of diversifying their portfolios, who are now just, well, as we speak, they're just subscribing to attend both. So I absolutely echo what you're saying, Jennifer.
Thank
Trump
you.
coming
Bo.
back to power has this ripple effect that the world is still reeling from, put it this way. But at the same time, it is because of that a totally fresh wave of private investment being mobilized is happening
There's
now,
new
despite all the odds,
solutions.
and probably
Yeah.
because of that.
Yep.
Well, there's a new urgency. There's a new urgency now being created because we're seeing all of the institutions that we had this very complacent comfort position in that are now being shattered, and some of them literally overnight. And so it's creating a lot of uncertainty, but it's also creating a lot of motivation to do something and think differently. So it's a little bit, it's maybe sounds sadistic, but it's a little bit exciting to see where this all lands.
Anya, let me ask you, for the person who is trying to figure out where to start on their journey, what advice would you give them?
I would say do not focus so much on the how. You'll never figure it out. All of the pieces. As a founder, someone with an idea, you're really more of like a bus driver and you know where the bus is going to go, but your job is to fill up that bus with a team that can help you get there. So it's really not about the how, it's about the who. Like you said, when I got started, I knew nothing about being a startup founder. I thought you had to be a coder to have a tech company. I knew nothing about construction except putting in some hardwood floors for my dad in the summer. And definitely nothing about concrete, marine, but literally nothing. But I was just extremely obsessed with finding a solution. And I went out and found out who had those missing pieces that I didn't have. And so the founding team is really the one that was able to give birth to this idea of these 3D printed living seawalls, which I could have never done on my own. So that's my advice: to not wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect moment. You have to start today. And number two, surround yourself with this zone of genius, the people who have the same passion as you but can bring in different skills that you don't have yet.
I love that. Thank you. Neil, how about from you?
Oh yeah, I mean I'll echo what everybody has said. I said it before. The
We
reality.
can't hear you.
You can't hear me
Yeah,
right
we
now?
can hear him.
We
We
can
can hear
hear.
him.
The world that we get is the world that we invest in, but I don't think that we do that individually. I actually really believe in the power of community. How we got started is we actually invited friends and hopefully advisors and things like that to our table, and we invited community in. So often we get the question asked by reporters and other people: how do you convince people around sustainability and regeneration? And that's not my job at all. My job is to invite and enroll people, and we need to stop asking the question of what do we need to do, and we need to start asking better questions of what do we want to create. And we create that with other people, sharing our ideas and being really generative at the table.
Thanks. Yasmin.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, I think one of the main things is to ask better questions, especially when it comes to materials where everybody's using something in some way. Where does it come from? What is it made of? And what happens to it at the end of the cycle of life? It's very basic questions. And as we are living in a digital world, coming also what you said, there are communities around the world. I mean, there has never been an easier time to get to know people who are taking care of these subjects, who are discussing it, groups like, we are talking about. So there has to be some kind of self-motivation to research and look out for like-minded people in your group and share knowledge. It's about collaboration. It's not a journey by yourself to figure it all out. I think it comes back to what we said about communities. And there is a lot of information today, and we have never had so much access on the global level to find out. So yeah, asking better question and connecting to a community, I would say.
Friends, thank you so much for your time today. This has been extremely helpful. And for the audience, there will be show notes. This will be edited and available, and I will include in show notes how to find these incredible people. And my hope is that this conversation connects you with each other, connects some audience members with you guys, and we just continue to push this conversation forward. Thank you all so much for joining me today. It has been my privilege and an honor to have you here.
Thank you for organizing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Christy.